We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chof, in volume 20. This is the first Sicha for the Parshas Vayishlach. This is a Rashi Sicha. The Rebbe explains all the details in the Rashi. And basically, the Pasuk says that Esav, when he encountered Yaakov, the Pasuk says that he hugged him and he kissed him. And the whole Sikha discusses later on this relationship of that kissing that Rashi brings down. Some say that it was done with all of his heart, and another interpretation is that it was a fake. And in this discussion in the Sikha, the Rebbe brings out, according to all opinion, it wasn't honest, because even if it was it was only for that moment, so it wasn't really the real thing. And the Rebbe goes through a lot of detail of the questions, and we'll go step by step. Vayishlach Aleph, Oifim Pasik, Vayoratz Esav Likrosei. So the Pasik states that Esav ran towards Yaakov. Vayichabikeyu, and he hugged him. Vayipel al tzavarom, and he fell over his neck. It says Vayishakeyu vayivku, and he kissed him, and they cried. Is Rashi mighting them word Vayichabikeyu? So Rashi brings from the pasuk the word Vayichabikeyu, and he hugged him. On his mefarish, Rashi explains how come Esav, who was such an enemy, he came to fight and he came to destroy Yaakov. How come all of a sudden he hugs him? So Rashi explains this Galgilu Rachamov, that his compassion rolled in, sort of came about. When he saw Yaakov was bowing, as the pasuk says, all of the bowing down, he kept on bowing to him 7 times till he came him. So when he saw this, his compassion was aroused, rolled in, and that's why he hugged him. Over here, Rashi doesn't bring down with the truth or not truth. Apparently, this was all true. But in the next Rashi, the Noch is a matik word. Then Rashi quotes from the pasuk the word Vayishakeyu, and he kissed him. On his mefarish, Rashi explains Nokud Olav, that there is dots on the word Vayishakeyu. There is dots. There are those that there is a disagreement in the Braise, in the Sifri, what exactly do these dots on Vayishakeyu, what they mean? There are those that expounded that this Nakuda is to tell us that he did not kiss him with all of his heart. It's a dotted kiss, meaning that the kiss is not real. Even though the pasuk says he kissed him, but it was not with all of his heart. That's the first opinion. But Amar Rab Shimon ben Yochai, Rab Shimon Yochai says, Halocha hi b'yadua she'esav soineh liYaakov. It is a halocha. It's a law. And it's known that Esav hates Yaakov. But at that point, his compassion warmed up, heated up at that particular moment, and he did kiss him with all of his heart. He kissed him all of his heart. So it seems that Rashi over here learns 2 possibilities, whether it was an honest kiss, or what the first opinion says that it was not really a real kiss, and the other one says, yes, it was a real kiss. But Rebbe asks, before, when it comes to Vayicha Bekehu, Rashi doesn't say anything over there that it wasn't real. So how come Rashi didn't over here when it comes to the kissing? Rashi says one opinion says that it's not real. But what is the meaning of Vayicha Bekehu that it says in the previous pasuk? Rashi doesn't say that it wasn't real, or that there is an opinion that wasn't real. How come Rashi only says by Vayicha Bekehu? Rashi leaves it, and Rashi says that Nizgalgu Rachamov. That means that he really hugged him. And why doesn't Rashi bring down, how do we going to explain Vayicha Bekehu according to the opinion of that it wasn't a real kiss, the first opinion of the Sifri? Rashi doesn't explain that Vayicha Bekehu it wasn't real. Darf man verstehen. So we need to understand. Pavos is Rashi mefarish the word Vayicha Bekehu. How come Rashi explains the word Vayicha Bekehu that he hugged him, Leuten zweiten Pirush in zweiten Dibra Maschil, according to the second interpretation in the second Dibra Maschil, in the second Rashi, that it was really Nizgalgul Rachamov as the kissing that Shimon ben Yochai says in the next Rashi, the second, that it was a real hug. It was a real hug, just like he says by the kiss, that according to Shimon ben Yochai, that it was a real kiss. But Rashi doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't say what the hug means. According to the first Pirush, it says that he didn't kiss him with all his heart. It doesn't say anything that the Chabkeyu wasn't with all of his heart. Maybe the reason Rashi doesn't say anything about the Chabkeyu because he realized that he's going to say it in the next Rashi, so he doesn't have to say it over here. But the Rebbe argues, we have a Beferisher Posik because it started. I mean, so we have a Beferisher Remes, but there is no dots on Vayicha Bekehu. So how could it be that he kissed him? He should have said, according to the Pshat, what's the Pshat of Vayicha Bekehu? According to the first one, that it wasn't a real Vayishakehu, so somehow there was not even Chabkehu, but Rashi can't say that he relies on the Rashi that he's going to say in a minute that the Vayishakehu isn't real, and that's why we know the Chabkehu isn't real, because by the Yishakehu is not real because there's dots there, but there's no dots on the Chabkehu, so he should explain something, what's going on with the Chabkehu. And it's difficult to say. As Rashi verlässt sich auf sein Pirush in selben Pasuk, that Rashi relies on his commentary, which is in the same Pasuk, Tekef La'achar, which comes immediately following this, Oy Vayishakeyu, as Le'no Shoke B'chol Libay, that he didn't kiss him with all his heart, so Rashi relies on that. Since the kissing was not B'chol Libay, so also the hug was not with all of his heart. Can't say that because while in Vayishakeyu is in Pasik Farana Spitzel and Libut, because when it says Vayishakeyu in the verse, there is a special teaching. There's a nikut, there is a dots. If I raise to learn this out that it wasn't real, because it says Vayishakeyu. It doesn't say any dots. We don't have any special limud. So how are we going to learn the Vayichabkeyu? So Rashi should have explained that according to the first Pirush, just as Rashi explains according to the second Pirush, that at that moment it was Nichmaru Rachamov, that his compassion is Galgul Rachamov, and he really hugged him. So Rashi should have said, according to the second one, that it says that he's not, it wasn't with all of his heart. What happened to the Vayichabkeyu? Rashi doesn't say anything. The Rebbe is going to ask now, several questions on the Rashi. It seems in Pashtus that Rashi learns that both of these commentaries, whether it's real kissing or not the real kissing, are equal pirushim. The Rebbe has the rule that whenever Rashi introduces or first says that there's two commentaries, that means to say that they're both of equal value. Why do we need Bechlal two commentaries? That's number one question. But there's also why wouldn't Rashi just say that he did not like the commentary, the first commentary, that he didn't really kiss him with all of his heart? Because there's dots there, which seem to take away from the meaning of Vayishlach, and it also fits with the general theme that Esav hated Yaakov, so that it wasn't real. Why does Rashi have to give us both pirushim, and then they're equally, whether it was a real kiss or not? Base. Also, we need to understand in Dibra Maschil Vayishlach, in the Rashi of Vayishlach. The first one question was why Rashi doesn't say anything by Vayishlach that it wasn't real, like the first in the Vayishlach. But now the Rebbe's question is in the Rashi Vayishlach itself. Why Rashi needs to come on to two interpretations? Noch mehr. Furthermore, from them was Rashi is Magdim v'yesh chelkim bedover hazer. Not only does Rashi have two commentaries, why do we need it? But by the introduction from Rashi that he says there's a disagreement in this matter, whether it was real or not, is mashma, it appears as beide pirushim zayin shkulim in pshuta shel mikra, that in the literal level of the pasuk they're both equal. This haste. When Rashi makes that introduction, that means to say, Nit vial derech harogil, when Rashi brings zwei oder mer pirushim, oder madamar. Not the usual way. When Rashi brings two or more commentaries or two opinions on velches is akdoma. When Rashi doesn't make an introduction, there are two. It just starts off and brings two opinions. As though kumen merere pirushim, without saying, hey, there's more commentaries here. It just starts off one pirush and then to the second pirush. Was dann bringt dem ersten pirush oder mandomer frier. In that case, when there is no introduction, so why does Rashi quote first one opinion, one interpretation first? Because that is more closer to the simple meaning of the pasuk. Ben Rashi is magdim far beide pirushim, as opposed to, but Rashi introduces before both pirushim, as in our case, v'yesh chelki bedover hazeh, that there's no disagree in this matter. Why would Rashi have to say that there's those that argue about it? You should start telling the argument without giving the introduction. There is two opinions about it. That statement that there's two opinions is coming to tell us that both opinions are equal, even though you can't write two opinions at the same time. I write one and two, but I'm introducing to you that there's two opinions, meaning that they're both equal. Is the Akdome zu beweisen, that introduction comes to point to show as beide pirushim seine shkulim b'pshuta shel mikra, that both of these commentaries are equal in the simple meaning of the pasuk. So basically, you see from here that not only does Rashi bring down these two commentaries, but Rashi actually thinks that both of these commentaries are equal. But it would seem that Pirush von Yesh Dorshu, this interpretation that there's some say that this Nakuda was expounded to tell us that he didn't really kiss him with all of his heart, that interpretation seems to be the more accurate one. It seems to be the more simple one. Is merbe pashtus, that seems to be more simply, because for first of all, because when there's a point, there's a dot, that seems to diminish the content, the meaning of the word. It says Vayishakeyu, but it's dotted to say, no, it's not really. Der inyan anikud is in under erter betoira, as the concept of a dotted, when it's, as we find in other places in the Torah, was werden dort gebracht in Sifri. The Sifri brings other places. The language Sifri says similar to this. He brings other examples of nikud. So this would be the simple meaning in the pasuk that Vayishakeyu would dot it. It's not really Vayishakeyu. And that's because of the dots, but also the contents of the whole storyline here. This also is logical in the simple meaning of the pasuk, that he didn't really kiss him because he was an enemy. So that seems to be the more easier, as opposed to the second opinion of Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Is nidglatik, it's not smooth. Vos gitasu, what does it add? Was der Wort Vayishakeyu is nakudalov. What do we need the dots over there? Without dots, it means Vayishakeyu kissed him. So it means the regular way of kissing is b'chol libay. Suzogun, as n'shoku b'chol libay. Why we don't need the dots to tell us that he kissed him with all his heart? Then you don't need to come on. The that means that he kissed him with all his heart. That would be the very simple interpretation of that he kissed him. So, according to Rav Shimon bar Yochai, we don't have such a good explanation. Why is there dots on there? Why do we need these dots for? And since there is dots here, so Rashi should say, not like Rav Shimon bar Yochai, he should say like the first opinion. Why does he bring down and say Rav Shimon bar Yochai's opinion that it wasn't with all of, that it was with all of his heart is equal, Peter's, to the first one? Now, some Mefarshim explain that in this case, Vayishakeyu without the dots would have actually meant, according to Rav Shimon bar Yochai, that he didn't kiss him with all of his heart, because since it's known that Esav is hated Yaakov, so even though the pasuk would have said Vayishakeyu, we would have known without dots that it doesn't mean real, because he was an enemy, and the dots come to tell us that it did kiss him. So that's the way we're going to explain the dots. Mefarshim zayin masbir. Mefarshim explain ados gufa kumt Rabbi Shbi zogam, that this is actually what Rav Shimon bar Yochai is coming to tell us. That the dot is to tell us that it was with all of his heart. It's not something that we would have known on ourselves. As the Mefarshim explain, since it is halacha that Esav hates Yaakov, so Rashi is coming to tell us that Vayishakeyu does not normally mean real kissing, because since Esav hates Yaakov, and therefore, if it should be like the first interpretation, that he didn't really kiss him with all of his heart, then you don't need to have the dot to tell us, to take away from the Vayishakeyu. We don't need the dot for that. That we would know ourselves, because we know Esav hates Yaakov. But the Nikud provides them hepech. They are learning that the Nikud points to the opposite, as is Yagiv and Becholi, but that it was with his heart, with all of his heart. The Rebbe says, according to this interpretation, is that Nikud nit memayed the pirush from Vayishlach. So according to this, the dot does not diminish, take away Vayishlach, nor adra, but this dot is coming to tell us on the contrary. It is madgish umechazik. It emphasizes it and it strengthens. Und das ist lechoire nicht wie der Ian Hanikud in andere Erter Beteure. This is not the idea of a dot in other places in the Torah, welche Rashi brings down. In different places we find the letter Rashi doesn't bring down the Nikud. Over there, it takes away from the word. Was der Nikud is memayit dem Teuchen von der Teva HaMenukedes. That dotting diminishes the contents of the word that is dotted, to tell us that the word should not be literally without the dot. But in this case, the dot is coming to tell us that you should read it in the normal way. Was bringt Rashi euch dem zweiten Pirush? So the question is, since the more logical and consistent with other Rashis is that the dot is diminishing, which is the first shot that he didn't kiss him with all his heart. So why does Rashi bring it down at all? The second Pirush. Und is noch magdim. And not only does he bring it down, but he tries to tell us it's an equal Pirush. He says there's those that disagree, meaning bringing in the both Pirushim together. As der Pirush is bipshute shel mikra shokul zum ersten Pirush, that this commentary is, when you're learning in the simple meaning of the verse, it's equal to the first Pirush. As beide Pirushim stehen taki in Breise de Sifri. Although, I mean, it says in the Breise de Sifri we have both Pirushim, so Rashi doesn't have to bring down everything that it says in Sifri. Is aber nit in Yoneh Shal Rashi. It is not Rashi's task to mighty sein Droshes Chazal to quote the expounding interpretation of our sage of blessed memory. Seiden was his negeya, so avonos pshute shel mikra, unless those aspects which are important to understanding the simple meaning of the pasuk. And we'll see later on how the Rebbe explains that even according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, we're also saying that the Rebbe will learn it's also not to tell us that it's not real kissing, that is taken away from it. We'll see in the Rebbe's answer. Gimel. Now the Rebbe is going to ask some more specific question. Why the emphasis that this is Matzine Bebreise de Sifri? Euch darf man verstehen, die zwei Pirushim in Vayishlach. These two interpretations, Vayishlach, bringen sich in noch älter. They're brought down in other places. Pabros bringt sie Rashi, wie sie seinen in Sifri. How come Rashi brings them down as we find them in the Sifri? Und is noch medayik zu sagen, and he specifically emphasizes to say, as the Machloike state in Breise the Sifri, that it's in the Breise of Sifri. Now, it doesn't just say in the Sifri, but the Breise. Why the emphasis? The Machloikes bringt sich euch in Breishis Rabbah. This agreement is also brought down in Breishis Rabbah. That's the Medrash Rabbah on Breishis. Al-Asar, right on the Pasuk. Vi euch in Ovis der Abnosen, also in Ovis der Abnosen. So how come Rashi Take brings down Davke the Sifri and emphasizes the Sifri here? So Bish Loima, we understand was Rashi bringt nicht beide days from Breishis Rabbah. The fact that Rashi doesn't bring down both opinions, there's two opinions in Breishis Rabbah. But the second opinion in Breishis Rabbah is at all not fitting in Pshut Shel Mikra, so it's understood why Rashi doesn't bring down both commentaries from Breishis Rabbah. because over there it says that he wanted to bite him, that he wasn't even intending to kiss him, and his neck became like a marble, and he couldn't bite him, and that's not according to the Pshuti Mikra. So Bishloim was Rashi bringt nicht beide days from Bereshis Rabbah, that he doesn't bring down both opinions of the Bereshis Rabbah. Yesh Loimar, we can say, while the zweite day dort, the second opinion over there, das Rabbi Yanai, the opinion of Rabbi Yanai, which says Elo Malamed Sheloi Bal Nashkai Elo Nashkai, that he didn't really come to kiss him, but he wanted to bite him. But Nasit Savorish Avinu Yaakov Shel Shayish, and the neck of our father Yaakov turned into marble chulu, is nit masim pshuti shel mikra. This doesn't fit in the simple meaning of the pasuk. In the Vayishlach says he kissed him, and here we're saying that he bit him. That's not the simple meaning. So you can't bring that second interpretation of the Bereshis Rabbah. But besides that, if he say is the nikud, therefore the point over here would be Vayishlach, that he didn't kiss him at all. He bit him. So it comes out that the nikud didn't just make a lesser Vayishlach, but it changed it. He didn't kiss him at all. If he says the nikud nit machlish dem teuchem von der Wort, according to this, the dot does not weaken the meaning idea of this word of Vayishlach, not as zim shoyle legamri, but rather it negates, it rejects. And the dad is telling you that he didn't kiss him. Kilu ve'eris moichek, as if he's erased it. So he doesn't bring the two opinions of Bereshis Rabbah. We see, aber you can bring in the erste day from Bereshis Rabbah, but the first opinion of Bereshis Rabbah he could have brought, which is the second opinion in this Rashi. Das Reb Shimon ben, no, not the same. Sorry, here's Reb Shimon. Das Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Over there, it's the opinion of Shimon Elazar. Melamed shenichmeru rachmo ba'isishav v'noshke b'cholibe. This teaches us that his compassion warmed up at that moment, and he kissed him with all of his heart. Was das is doch azoi v'das Rashbi in Sifri. That is just like the opinion of Rab Shimon bar Yochai, which is in the Sifri. Over there, it's Rab Shimon ben Elazar. That he could have brought from the Bereshis Rabbah, that one opinion. Ubefrat noch, especially as das Rab Shimon ben Elazar in them inyan hanikud, that opinion of Rab Shimon Elazar from the Bereshis Rabbah, the idea when we talk about dotting words, he said, "B'chol mokum she'ata moitze hakasav rabba al hanekuda," that every place where the writing, the letters is more than the dot, atodeirish haksav, then you say the word. But Rab Shimon ben Elazar is maschel the mit. That's how he starts his commentary in Bereshis Rabbah, that when you have the dots more than the word, then we darshan the dots and we take away the word. That Rashi already brought down. So this would be a continuation from Rab Shimon ben Elazar's statement that Rashi has already quoted before, to bring down the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Elazar that Beishon Nichbru. So why doesn't Rashi emphasize Sifri? That opinion is already, the second opinion could be from Bereshis Rabbah, the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Noisef Lazer. In addition to that, in Ovis the Rab Nosson stay in Beide Deis. In Ovis the Rab Nosson, both opinions, there is a very short and very clear language. It says one opinion, Melamed Shalei Nishokoi Be'emes, teaches us that he didn't really kiss him. Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer, there is also Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Neshik zu shalames v'kulam einum shalames. This was a true kiss, but other ones are not true. That particular one are not true. The Rebbe in the Hara brings down exactly what does it mean, kulam einum shalames. But the bottom line is why not bring down the others that have done. Why the emphasis tafke the sifri and the price of the sifri heint. So therefore, favos is Rashi medayik. Why is Rashi emphasized to tell us Aleph to meitig zayin loshen hasifri? He quotes the language of the sifri. Beis and Rashi is to mitzayin zayin the moker. And then, first of all, he quotes the Sifri, and Rashi references Beferish to his source that it is in Sifri. V'yesh cholkin bebraisa the Sifri, telling us that it's in the Braisa of the Sifri. Number 3, to bring in euch dem Nomen from Balamaimer, that he also brings the author of this statement, v'yer is in Sifri, as it's in Sifri, that it's Rav Shimon bar Yochai, while we have the name elsewhere as Rav Shimon ben Elazar, but Rashi makes sure to tell us this is Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Some places Rashi doesn't bring a name altogether. Here Rashi brings Rav Shimon bar Yochai. And Dalet also to bring in Bas Cholas L'Shoinei. Rashi to bring down in the beginning of his language, Haloche hi biyadua she'esav soinei liYaakov. This is a halacha that he hates Yaakov. Why is it important to hear to know that Esav is saying to Yaakov? We don't need that introduction. We just start right away. Is that and Rashi himself befrat as euch von Sim Aloshen, was steht euch im Bereshis Rabbah. Just the end of the language, which is also in the Bereshis Rabbah, Elo Melamed, Shenichmru Rachmo B'Yisishon Shokim B'Chol Libay. At that point, so with the fact that we're saying at that point, Oishishon, at that time, he kissed him, that means that usually he hates him. So we don't have to tell you that he hates him. Why is that important to say it over here? That is halochet, bidush esav soin Yaakov. The fact that just say that it teaches us that at that point, he kissed him in all his heart. So we know that usually that's not the case. Versteht as be'etzem is given, sei freier, sei später, that in essence, in both before and after he was a hater, he hated Yaakov. Why does Rashi have to bring the Hagdama of Halochi hi biyadua she'esav soinei Yaakov? So, the question that the Rebbe asked before, also, and in addition to the specific questions, is that according to Rav Shimon ben Yochai, the second Pirush of Rashi, why does Rashi B'chlal bring down? That doesn't seem to be the Pashat Pshat, because a dat comes to soften. And according to Rav Shimon ben Yochai, the dat over here is coming to emphasize. Why is Rashi bring down that pshat? And all the other questions the Rebbe is going to attempt to answer. Could have answered the above questions in Siv Beis and Gimel. That Lloyd beide day is kum der nikut schwacher machen dem Vayishlach, that according to both opinions, the dots are coming to actually soften the Vayishlach. Because the Chelek is nor, the difference between the two interpretation is only how we're making it softer. As if we go according to the first commentary, that he did not, the first opinion, that he didn't really kiss him with all of his heart, macht in the nekuda schwacher dem iyan haneshika b'chlal. Then it diminishes the kissing, that the kissing wasn't the real kissing. Unloit das Rashbi, but according to the opinion of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, mach the nekuda, not the word schwacher, dem teuchen ha'inyan von Vayishlach in them posik. Over there it diminishes, the dots make that the content. It says that he kissed him in this posik, in the verse, in the contents of the posik, not the word of Vayishlach, nishikas Esav liYaakov. So normally, how do we understand nishikas Esav liYaakov? Nishikas Esav liYaakov is not a normal nishika. We're saying that this was and the pasuk nishikas liYaakov yois as biyadua she'esav seinu liYaakov. Since it is known that Esav hates Yaakov, wird man doch verstanden, so then you understand in the pasuk when it says Vayishlach, he kissed him, he kissed Yaakov. Don't meint azan nishike was Esav asoyne kush Yaakov. So what does it mean Vayishlach? He kissed him in a superficial kiss, not a real kiss, because we're talking about Esav kissing Yaakov. Der Nikud, und is memayet dem move on from Vayishlach da, and it takes away the understanding of kissing him over here, which in the contents means not a real kiss. As der Yishkehu is given b'chol libay. The meaning of Vayishlach is not the word Vayishlach. The meaning of Vayishlach means it's not a real kiss. So it diminishes the meaning over here, not a real kiss, and telling him that it is given b'chol libay, that it is a real kiss. So it's diminishing the meaning of this kiss to Yaakov, Yaakov's kiss by Esav, which normally would mean not b'chol libay, and we're diminishing and taking away from that interpretation, and we're saying it's different than it is b'chol libay. The Rebbe is trying to answer all the questions with this, but the Rebbe is not going to accept that with this idea. Is move on. So now we understand how the questions that we asked before, why is this a good pshat? And how does it fit with the Nikud? Aleph, wie beide Pirushim seinen Masim mit dem Teuchen Inyan HaNikud lefi Pshutesh HaMikra. We understand that both the commentaries fit with the idea of the daring in Pshutesh HaMikra. What does daring mean? As the Nikud kommt, schwacher machen den Movement von dem Wort HaMenukad. That it comes to make softer the understanding of the word that is daring. According to the first one, the literal meaning of Vayishlach, with kiss, to mean that it's not real kiss. According to the second one, the meaning of Vayishlach, in this case, that it wasn't real, and make it softer than it was real. Base. Also, what we would understand, the Tam was bringt euch the zweite day for Rashbi. We also need why he brings the second opinion of Rav Shimon Yochai. Warum loy der erster day? Because according to the first opinion, as the Nikud is machlish the minyan and the shikol bechlal, that this Nikud weakens the idea of kissing, that it's not a real kiss. According to that, od der Nikud gedarft sein nor auf the Oisiyos Vayishlach. Vayishlach who, so we have the word who means him. If we're trying to just soften the kiss part, that it should be on the word Vayishok, on the Vav Yud Shin Kuf. Mashenkin, later Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, is move on, was the Nikud is of dem ganzen word Vayishokehu, to soften that his kiss is not the real his kiss over here, because it was B'chol Libay. To take out from the contents that Vayishokehu means not B'chol Libay, and it means yes B'chol Libay. So it takes away from the force of the Pirush of Vayishokehu that Yaakov kisses, Esav kisses Yaakov B'chol Libay, take away from that. No, it's not. And that's why we have the dots also on the letter Hey Vav. That's what Rashi brings down this pshat also. And Gimel would also understand was Rashi bring Davke the droshe from Sifri, why Rashi specifically brings the expounding of the Sifri unit von Ovis Ramnosen and not from Ovis Ramnosen, while Davke in dem Loshon there state in Sifri, because it's specifically the language that it says in the Sifri. It says halacha he biyadua she'esav sender Yaakov. We know this as a halacha that Esav hates Yaakov. But his compassion warmed up at that moment, and he kissed him with all of his heart. Gitzich arois der Teuchen from Pirush, that expresses the idea of this commentary. As on them Nikud, without that Voltman verstanden, we would understand Vayishokehu v'nishikas von Asoina. We would understand it that it is like the kiss of an enemy without the dots. So, which means that it's a not a real kissing, because halachi canal. And then Nikud is memayed dem toich v'vayishokehu. And the dot says no, takes away from the contents. In this case, it was a real kiss. That would have made sense also. And Dalet was bringt euch dem Namen from Balamaimer, why he also quotes the name of the author of the statement. Und Davke Digger says specifically this version of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Why? Because Rabbi Shimon is Doirish Timer de Krom. Shimon, he usually expounds the reason of the posik, goes into the idea. Need the verter. Onzog farzich. He doesn't, the words by itself, even though it doesn't fit, sometimes he goes by the reasoning of the posik. Nor zusammen mit noch mehr loitzertam, but the way he expounds the words is together and even more by using the reason. The reason is the motive, is the deciding factor how Reb Shimon Bar Yochai looks at a posik. And what's lefizei is move on. So that you understand was a learn them nikud, that he learns that the daring over here, as it is memad, need them taich from word, that this is not diminishing the word Vayishlach farzich by itself, as it is according to the first opinion. Therefore, it doesn't. It's not important who we're talking about. We're just looking at the word by itself, not that it was Esav over here. Der Teuchen from word, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, the Dorish time of the Kro, he goes by the posik. He takes into account the contents of the word, where is a Chelek from the ganzen Inyan, as it is a portion of this entire subject matter. By Vayishokehu from Esav to Yaakov, because when it says here that when Esav kisses Yaakov, is a Dorish time of the Kro. He expounds the reason of the posuk as me versteht, that this is understood ados seine nishika soina. That's the meaning of the posuk. Und der nikud is memaed dem tam do, and the nikud takes away from the reasoning over here the time of the crow takes away from the reason that he's a hateful person. That Nikud points that, okay, this is with all of his heart. It's not the usual way. That would be an attempt, a Rebbe attempting, maybe we can say that way. But the problem is, the Rebbe says, usually the Nikud is not coming to take away from the content. The Nikud is coming to, in all of the places, to take the word away, not the content to take away from the idea, but to take away from the meaning of the emphasis of the word. That it's not, hey, aber der Pirush is nicht glattig. This is not smooth. Warum in alle andere Erter, in all other places, kommt der Nikud schwacher machen, that Nikud comes to soften, to make weaker the Teuchen von dem Wort Amenuka, the contents of the word that has been dotted. Is a Deuche zu sagen, so it's difficult to say, Ador macht schwacher den Teuchen ha'inyan von Vayishlach shebeparsha, that here he is softening the content of the subject matter from Vayishlach in the parsha, und dem Teuchen vom Wort allein, but the meaning of the word itself, macht gar starker, the word itself becomes stronger, Vayishlach, but he's softening the content that it's not real, but it is a real because, in this case, Nichmarach. Besides the fact, in addition to this, that the Nikud doesn't still fit according to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, we still don't understand, notwithstanding we answered many of the questions, but was is Kavonas Rashi mit Zogen, as the Machloikes is in Braisa de Sifri. What does Rashi mean by saying that this argument is in the Braisa of Sifri? Beis, Vos is the Loshen Halacha hi biyadua. What is the language? It's halacha that it's known. Dois doch negeya ados is yadua canal. Here we have to say, according to this Pirush, since we know and we're softening that what we know normally. But what is halacha biyadua? What's the word halacha? In the Reiv and the Fusei Sifri Shalafanenu, in most of the printed Sifri which we have, is the Loshem B'divrei Rashbi, the language in the word of Shimei Yochai, Elon Nepchu Rachamov. His compassion was turned over. Pavosok Rashi, we see in Breishis Rabba, Rashi uses the language of Breishis Rabba, Elo Shenichmeru Rachmov, that his Rachamov warmed up. So the Rebbe is going to explain, in the Rebbe's explanation, not only will we understand what the Nikud means over here, that also according to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, it's also softening the Vayishlach, that it's a Oiseh Shah, which is a softening of Vayishlach, but we'll also understand all these additional difficulties or emphasis and the diyukim that Rashi brings down over here. In Ois Vav, the Rebbe explains that there's actually two steps. Rashi explains that this is something which we can understand, that Yaakov at that point had that emotional Rachamov, Nizgalgal Rachamov, that he really hugged him. But the extreme of Vayishlach, to go ahead and kiss him, that is something which doesn't really fit with Esav. Rashi is not coming to explain the dots. The dots on the words don't concern Rashi, as we don't find. But here, this helps Rashi understand how could it be that Esav all of a sudden will kiss Yaakov more than Vayichabkehu. And Rashi brings the two interpretations. Let's look inside. Both. Der Bir b'cholzeh. The explanation, all the above. Rashi kum do nit verantworten dem Nikud auf dem Wort Vayishlach. Rashi is not coming to answer to us why there is dots on the word Vayishlach. That's not what his problems is. What we get come upon him, as we had spoken many times, is Rashi nit mefarish alle nikud in Torah. Rashi does not explain all dots in the Torah. That means that in of itself is not a concern to Rashi. Therefore, is muchach. From that, it's evident that inyan hanikud, that this idea that there is dots. The same thing is sometimes a word is written missing a letter or an additional letter. Those are not Rashi's concern. This is not a problem in Pshuta Shel Mikra. Rashi doesn't always answer it and doesn't address it. And we don't have to, therefore Rashi is not forced to explain it when you learn the simple meaning of the pasuk. Rashi does explain it, the points when that is something that adds to the simple meaning of the parsha. Saiden, Shas, Isfaran, Belav Hoche Ashayla. And the exception is if it's a case where there is, in any event, a question, or the shverikite, or the difficult, in Havonas Pshuta Shel Mikra, in understanding the simple meaning of the pasuk, Dan bringt Rashi is mefarish. Then Rashi brings down and explains Bekama Mekoimes in many places them nikud, why there is a dot, or them choser, or why there is missing a letter in some words. Was there mit verstandig Pshuta Shel Mikra, by explaining that the simple meaning of the verse is understood. So Rashi is not concerned about the choser of yater or the nikud in of itself, only if it's something which has something else to add, either answers a difficulty in the pshat, then Rashi addresses. So here, in our pasuk, kommt Rashi v'nenter na shaila v'shtel sich al pi pshat. Here Rashi comes to answer a question that is raised by the simple meaning. Wie is es Esav mitamol iber gekert geworden min hakotza lakotza? How is it that Esav all of a sudden turned around from one extreme to the other extreme? So azar chiba v'ava liYaakov, to such a dearness and such a love to Yaakov. Then Neveis, as Vayistem Oisoi, he condemned him. Bizar vilim hargin, until the extent that he wants to kill Yaakov. When it comes to the angels, sending them to find out, they say he's still in his hatred. And now he's coming to wage war with Yaakov. He's going towards you with the 400 men with him. How is there such a change around from one extreme to the other extreme? Is Rashi Mevayir? That's what Rashi explains. As there Vayicha that this hugging is take given as spitzele geshenish. This was actually a special happening. Nizgalgilu rachamov. They rolled in, sort of something unique. Sort of rolled in something from the outside. Rachamov. V'hasiba, and why all of a sudden did it roll in? As he saw him bowing all these bowing downs. And in them is netoke machloikis, and here we have no disagreement. This is pshute shel mikra lechol hadeis. This is the simple meaning according to all opinions. We don't need any other opinions that we have later on. And Rashi doesn't explain anything because according to all opinions, this is very understandable. But b'shas when it comes to kissing, this is not just a sign of this special dearness that you hug him, nor those bavais kissing points an excitement and a additional arousal of love in the heart, to the extent. These asses is need genug dibur, to the extent. Why do you kiss? Because just speaking isn't sufficient. And even not the hugging. As kommt Vayishlach, it also comes to a kiss. This is an extra step. Is something that the 5-year-old knows. He says the advantage when the love is expressed through a kiss more than the hug by himself. And in the attitude and relation of his parents to him, that sometimes you get a hug and even more you get a kiss. And that's why it doesn't really fit to say as mitzad dem vosra'ohu mishtachave kol hishtachavo isalolu, because he saw him bowing down all the above hishtachavos nizgalgal rachamov, so his compassion rolled in zolerin ganzen nishapach werden min hakotza lakotza, so that this should totally turn him around from one extreme to the other extreme, from sinosei, from the level of hatred, to wanting to kill him. So azah ahava gedola, to such a great love, as afila noch vayichabikeyu muskumen v'yishakeyu, that even after hugging him, he must kiss him. Here, Avdem Zokt Rashi nokodolov. It started, which means dois der nikud shayich tzupshutei shel mikro. Here, that is related, connects to the simple meaning of the pasuk. Kumt lernen, and is coming to teach us v'nikud b'chol mokim, as a dot everywhere. As der vayishokeyu is given a shvacher. It was a soft, it was a weaker, it wasn't a regular yishokeyu. It wasn't really a two nishike. An oizdruk von ava amitas. It wasn't an expression of a true love. This is the general according to both opinions. But specifically, why it wasn't a true love, Rashi has two opinions. One, that it was b'chlal, not a true love. And the other one is just at the moment, which means also it's not a true love. And in them is Rashi mevayer. There is a disagreement in this matter. The fact that kissing him, it was not something true. We can explain this two ways. There are those that expound this dot to tell us that he didn't kiss him with all of his heart. Although the hugging and that the compassion rolled in, that led to the kisses given by Mitius, that was true, but this was not true. Is, and the second opinion, as temporary at that point, kissed him in all his house. Which means, as after being hugged, after hugging him, which came because of his compassion, is so at that moment, when he already hugged him, his compassion heated up. There was a heated and a strong excitement, emotional. He became very emotional, so he kissed him with all of his heart. But that doesn't mean that it's a real kiss, because it was just the moment. Since this emotional was, and he kissed him with all of his heart, this was just in that time, is this nitkin that it's not something which is true. So according to both of them, it's not true. It's not the true kissing, because it was just in a temporary thing. And in order to emphasize that it wasn't really true, Rashi therefore brings down Esav hates Yaakov regardless. So even as I'm going to tell you that it's Noshke B'choliba, it doesn't mean really that. That's what Rashi introduces first, Zion. In order to emphasize that also according to the opinion of Shema Yechoy, that says that he kissed him with his whole heart. Rashi wants to tell us that it's not really. Is as nit given by mitius, that it's not something which was really in truth. Undar nikud, as the nikud is machlish then vayishakeu, that the God weakens, softens the vayishakeu the kiss is Rashi medayik to bring in bascholos divrei Rav Shimon bar Yochai. So Rashi specifically chooses to bring in the beginning of the commentary the words of Rav Shimon bar Yochai, halacha hi biyadua. It's a halacha. Rashi wants to say that you're not going to change that halacha, and therefore even the kissing b'chol liba is not really kissing a full halacha meant a din. Halacha means a law. Azach was by something that cannot change. Und das versteht afila ben chomish lemikra. This is understood also a 5 who learn chomish. Was lernt noch nicht Mishnah Gemara, who doesn't learn Mishnah Gemara. Zet in sein täglichen Leben, he sees in his daily life, as a halacha from Torah can man nicht biten, that a law of the Torah cannot be changed. Well, derech says Dr. Rav Shimon bar Yochai benidin dedan. Similarly, Rav Shimon bar Yochai says in our case, the sinner from Esav leYaakov can sich nicht biten, that hatred from Esav to Yaakov cannot change. Warum halacha? This is a law, and it's known that Esav hates Yaakov. This is similar that a literal halacha was cannot be changed. So no matter what I'm going to tell you, that b'chol libay cannot change that he hates him. And that the fact that he kissed him here is nervous. It's only that he kissed him at that moment with all of his heart. How do we reconcile? Are we saying it's halacha doesn't change, and then we say it did change? Well, we find it in halacha also. Sometimes there is an exception to the rule. Similar, you find it also in halacha. As this Ken Gimel sign, it's possible that there should be a temporary instruction, nit kifi halacha, not as the halacha. As, for example, the Elio Bahara Carmel, Elio and Mount Carmel. Was euch damals is nicht der Pshat as the halacha hat sich gebitten. Over there, it doesn't mean that the halacha changed. The halacha from Isur HaKrova Beboma is betok for euch damals. The law of the prohibition of offering an aboma is like what Eliyahu did at Mount Carmel remains. Also then, euch damals. In other words, he wasn't allowed to do it. The halacha stays. But is given the hira to makriv them korban b'mama. But at that point, with Eliyahu in the battle against the Nevi Habal, there was a specific that time a lesson, an instruction to bring the korban b'mama. And also we learned earlier, a Yaakov is given ish tam, so it was a tam, which means b'shas he was innocent. He wasn't deceptive. So that's who he is. Esav's Laramis is Aviv. But when Esav comes to trick his father, so that brought that Yitzchak wanted to give Esav the brachas because of his trickery. Because he thought Yitzchak Durdam Laramis by being deceptive. Shomadagdik mitzvahs that Esav cares about mitzvahs. So he's also with deceit. Yaakov the Tam becomes deceitful. But this is such a deceitful as Gam Baruch Yirma Baruch Yiyah, that the Father said he should be blessed. Al der b'mirma is b'chochma. Ba'achicha b'mirma, he come with wisdom. It's not the real mirma. So the same thing over here is the hatred still remains, but it is not a real Yishakeu. Just because at that particular time it changed. The Rebbe will continue to explain some of the other issues that were brought up earlier. The Rebbe's point over here is that even according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, still that he said b'chol libay, it was ba'isur shah, meaning that it wasn't really truthfully b'chol libay. That's why, because emes doesn't make a different, and that's why the Rebbe first says he can't bring down Ovos the Rab Nosson, which says that it was true, because even according Rashi believes that it wasn't true according to both opinions, that it wasn't really. That's why the Nokud is on both of them, but it's just the extent of the not truth, whether it was this Galgul Rachmov at that time, at least Oisha Shah, it was true, or even that not. Let's look inside. Ches. Al Pizeh is Oich move on a piece. Based on this, also understood Aleph. Was Rashi berekni the Machloikes on Ovos the Rab Nosson. How come Rashi does not bring down the disagreement as it's written in Ovos the Rab Nosson? Over there it says clearly either Loi Noshkoi Be'emes, he didn't kiss him in truth, and then it says in the Shikazu Shalemes that it was truth. Rashi doesn't bring that down, because Rashi believes that even according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, it wasn't really true. But Loit Beide Deis, Oich Lidasra Rashbi, because according to both opinions, also according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, as Rashi brings down over here, is don nit given keneshika shalemes. This is not a true kiss. The kissing here that Esav did wasn't really with truth. Because in truth there's no changes. So why are we saying that he noshko b'chol libay? It's not a true kiss. It's a b'chol libay, but not a true. A truth cannot be a change. The shaila is do not viful is do need given the emes. To what extent it wasn't true for nishik of this kiss? Leutnersh the mandomer, according to the first opinion, is afilu l'shah, even temporarily. Loy nishoke b'chol libay. He didn't really kiss her with all of his heart. On the das Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, and according to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, is ba'isur shah noshke b'chol libay. That at that moment he kissed him b'chol libay. Nor vibal. But since, as Rashi introduces, as halacha he be Yedua she'Esav soin Yaakov, we know the halacha is that Esav hates Yaakov, is afilu ba'isur shah. So even at that time that he's kissing him with all of his heart, he's just need ba'mitzvah. It's still not called the true, because it's not really true, because the halacha remains that he hates him. Also, we also understand that Rashi uses, the Rebbe asked before, instead of Rashi used Loshen Nichmeru, that they heated up, but not that they changed, not Nephu, because it wasn't really changed. He remained the same Soina like he was always. Beis, was Rashi bringt nicht dem Loshen HaSifri lefanenu. The fact that Rashi does not bring the language of the Sifri, which is in front of us, in our version of the Sifri, in which it states Nephu Rachmav B'Yisei Shah, that his compassion turned around. At that time, if Rashi used that Loshen, that would mean that there was a change. That would mean that at that time he turned around from his hatred on a feeling of true love. Rashi is blois, but Rashi specifically says all what happens here was nichmeru racham b'Yisei, that he warmed up. At his moment, it was at the moment. On Givarim Givorn, he was warmed up with a strong feeling of Rachamim, but it wasn't an authentic, it wasn't a change around, it was just a temporary, momentarily thing. The other thing we also understand now, why Rashi brings down, specifically Braisa de Sifri, to point out that this halacha is really a halacha in halacha, not in a medrash. Gimel, at his Magdim Adosh Teit Braisa de Sifri, he introduces that this is written in the Braisa de Sifri, because if Rashi wouldn't say that as you can't learn, and one could have learned as the Loshen Halochi Yedua that biyodua that this Loshen, which we say Halochi is it's known, is a Halochi in the Chelek Hadrush. It's a Halochi in the section of the expounding Shebetorim. I raisbringen die Maskone von dem drash, that this is to bring out the conclusion of the drash. It's halacha, but it's a conclusion of the drash. The Rebbe of Rashi, this is the Braise disifri. That this is the Braise disifri. This is in the Chelek halacha shebetoira. It's part of the portion of the halacha Torah. This is nit a drash fun medrash. This is not an expounding of the medrash. Nor dos is a halacha in Dinei Torah. This is a law in the laws of Torah as Esav Soine Yaakov Kinisker Lil, that Esav hates Yaakov. It remains in its throw. Rashi wants to emphasize that this is actually a halachic established fact. It's only a matter that temporarily it was heated up, but it wasn't really truth, because the truth is that Soine Yaakov all the time. However, the Rebbe in Oistes asks, how come Takir of Shimon ben Yechoyi doesn't say like the first one that it was talking also not true? Why does Rav Shimon ben Yechoyi say that since Rav Shimon ben Yechoyi says that halacha that he hates him, why would he have to say then that he at that moment at least also showed that it was true when there's halacha? They should say like the first shot, Rav Shimon ben Yechoyi, that it's taken not true. And Rashi and the Rebbe explains, because when you read the whole portion and everything that Esav did, so we're sort of pulled in two directions if in Esav. On one hand, we read that Esav Mamish wanted to kill him, and it doesn't make any sense for him to change around, as the Rebbe argued before. But on the other hand, later on, it looks like a total change. He said he was so nice to Yaakov, and he even offered him to help him bring the stuff, the presents to him, etc., etc. So it seems like, so there's like conflicting, and that's why Rashi says these are both Perushim. Because we have mashmoes that Esav one totally hatred fellow. The halacha is also that is hate, but we still have a little bit of a pointing in the parsha that he really genuinely, seemingly cared about Yaakov at that moment. So that's why Rashi says, let's look inside that test. We need to, however, understand what is the hechrech im pshuto shel mikra. What forces us when we learn the simple meaning of the pasuk as noshke b'chol liba, that he killed him with, that he kissed him with his whole heart? On the contrary, in the simple meaning, bald as Rashbi Yalein zokt, since he himself states halacha he biyadu sheish Esav soin liYaakov, that's a halacha that Esav hates Yaakov. So he should have, and on the contrary, he was able to, and he should have learned as that he didn't kiss him with all his heart. Why does he have to say that it wouldn't be similarly much more simpler for him to say that it wasn't genuine? Is the is the explanation of this. From the ganzen hemshech parsha is mashma. From the entire flow of the parsha, it appears as Esav is dan gestanden in a größer hisrakshus, that Esav at that point was standing in a great emotional excitement. Wie der Posik is gleich mamshich, as the Posik continues. As noch vayishakei, after kissing, is vayivku, they cried. But das is a boileter oizruk, that's a protruding expression, it's an outward expression from Goydel Regish Halev, how much the feeling of the heart that he cries. Weil derich Zetman in the Speter Dikereid von Esav, we also see in the following words of Esav, Ochi yiluchar shalach, my brother, let yours be yours. Biz atzigeno imcho min ha'om asher iti, I'm going to place with you some of the people that are with me to help you with your movement over there. So this seemed like a very emotional Esav and a very the different Esav than we know. Is im pshuta shel mikra shver zu sagen. So in the simple meaning of the pasuk, it's difficult to say ados alts given nor leponim weg, that all this was just a fake, it was just a pretend, just to show. Und as Esav was das nit gemeint b'chol liba, that Esav did not really mean this with all of his heart. It's difficult to say that. On the far nemt on Rashbi, that's what Rashbi assumes, accepts, as Ba'isa Show is nichmeru rachamov v'noshkoi b'chol liboy, that at that point his compassion warmed up and he kissed him with all of his heart. So now we understand was the zwei Pirushim, these two interpretations, Loy Noshke B'choliboy and Noshke B'choliboy, that Zayin Shkulim in Pshuta Shel Mikra are equal when we learn the simple meaning of the pasuk. When Rashi is the Far Magdim, that's what Rashi proceeds to say before he brings him down. There is disagreement, which means they're both equal. Because according to both commentaries, interpretation, to both interpretations, we have the same difficulty. According to the first opinion, as he didn't kiss him with all his heart. It's difficult, the flow of the parsha that follows. If he didn't kiss him with all of his heart, so how come he's crying and how come he's giving him his heart? Vusis Kantik. Over there it appears as the Vayishlach is given b'choliba. Over there it seems like it was with all of his heart. And according to the second one, that's Rashbi. Rashbi is nidglatik der Vayishlach b'choliba. It's difficult that it says that he kissed him with all of his heart, based on the previous standing that he was total hatred. How could he all of a sudden kiss him with all of his heart? So therefore he learns the how could he? Therefore he learns. So it's difficult. So therefore the other person doesn't agree with the Rashbi. He says that it was a fake because Esav was a hateful person. So that's why we have, on one hand, Esav was a hateful person. So how could we say that he really kissed him with all his heart? On the other hand, it seems that the parsha that he really was genuinely Vayishlach. So how could we say that it's all a fake? That's why we have the two opinions of the first opinion of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, why does the Rashi bring down Rav Shimon Bar Yochai Davke? Still, that seems a little conflicting here, that the same Rav Shimon Bar Yochai who starts off that he hates him, he says it changed around. Why would that same, how is such a change around connect? How could Rashbi have such a change around that on one hand he himself argues that it's a halacha that he hates him, and yet he says at that point he nichmeru rachmo. And that's explained because when we see the story of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai in the Gemara Me'ilah, that notwithstanding of all the hatred that he experienced from the Roman, that yet he was able to turn around. Let's see inside. Yud. A Talmud Mulach, a sharp student, Ken Mechaber Fragen, is still able to ask the question. Soif at the end, Ibald as Rashbi Alein is there was his madgish sinas Esav Yaakov. It is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai himself who emphasizes the hatred of Esav to Yaakov. He says halacha he biyudush Esav Seinu Yaakov. It's a halacha known that Esav hates Yaakov. That's what it says in the beginning. That's in the commentary of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Vikumtas as davke So how come it's specifically he is Olenan as nisch merurachma b'Yisrael that his compassion heated up at that time in Noshke B'choliba, and he kissed him with all his heart. That same person that says the halacha that he hates him is Rashi Meramiz dem Bir. So Rashi hints for the explanation to bring them Shem Bal Hamayim and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. That's what Rashi brings down. It was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. So the Rebbe brings down that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is given bisman from Golus Roimi Edom. He was at the time of the exile, the Roman exile in the Golus Edom. Was Esav who Edom. So this is the same Esav that we're talking about over here. Halacha she'Esav Seinu Yaakov. He actually felt it. He lived under them. In Azman from Gzeidus Koshes of Eden, and he lived in a time that was very difficult decrees to the Yidden. He himself specifically had the decree that he had to run away. He needed to run away from the Romans. He need to hide in a cave for 13 years. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son had to be in the cave for 13 years out of fear because the Romans wanted to kill him. And yet we find as Bishas mit Gedarb gain Kinderemi. So it was necessary to go Roman. They made a decree against the Yidden, against Yiddishkeit. So they needed somebody to go to Rome to nullify, to nullify the decree in the Yidden. So they said, let Rav Shimon Bar Yochai go. The reason is Shumalumet Benisim. Because he has been trained, miracles happen to him. Notwithstanding that great hatred of the Roman kingdom to the Ve'elo Bifrat, and to him specifically, he impacted through a miracle as Omar Lahoin. So he said to them, he made a whole thing. He had a demon entered the daughter, and then he took out the daughter. So they're very appreciative for Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. So he said to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, went along with him, She'ilu kol ma'adis l'choin lemisho, ask whatever you want to ask for. He was grateful, wanted to do for them. Ba'ilinu leganze, so he brought them up into his hiding, and where there was the decree, and they went and they got rid of that paper of that decree. And that's the way they nullified the Gezerah. That's the Gemara story in Mila. And therefore, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who sees that change around, that the same thing was with Yaakov Esav. As Yaakov was given a Malumad ben Nisim, that Yaakov, who was used to miracles, had gepoiled of Esav, that he impacted Esav. Even though we have a halacha that he hates him, but he can change that around, just like he changed around the government of Rome to protect the Yidden that way. That at that moment his compassion warmed up, and he kissed him with all of his heart. And the Rebbe brings down this idea of turning around actually in the Ra, in the Esav, and making a difference is also what Rashbi accomplished according to the Pnimis Inyonim. They're not only to elevate, but the Ra in their situation to bring them also some redeeming factor. Let me see, Yudalov. Let's look inside. This is also fitting. This fits the content and the idea of the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai service, the way it's in the inner matter of things. We find as Arois Geindik von der Ma'ora, when they left the cave, wherever Rabbi Elazar would smite, he was upset that people were not learning Torah, they're spending time on other things. So Rabbi Elazar would look, and he would smite them. He would cause problems because of his being upset with them. Rav Shimon would heal. That means the Seder for Moshe Rav Shimon, that order, the way Rav Shimon heals, is the Hanhoge versus Masim in Welt. That is the fitting conduct in the world. Nicht wie es darf sein l'choire al pi Hanhoge von Torah Moshe. Not the way it would seem that one who's learning is the craft should not. The world is like Rabbi Elazar, destroys, not to appreciate, protect the world. Because of the conduct of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his friends, and the common denominator, because they were on that high level, which Hanhogas Terosum Nosei, which is living a life which Torah becomes their craft, is Rabbi Elazar Mochi. That's why, according to that style of world's approach, is the Torah only thing, and everything else is Mochi. If they're not doing that, not Terosum Nosei. Aber Rav Shimon Bar Yochai hat aufgetan die Refuah in Welt. He healed the world in Ir Seder. How it's in her Seder, not in the prospect, not the world view from the Terosim and Mnoshe group, but the way the world itself needs to be conducted. Al derech zeh v'yiseidim mizu, Zokt Rashbi, similar to that. And also another point, we find that he's working with the world itself from the world's perspective. He says, I have the ability to exempt the entire world from judgment. What does he mean when he says I can exempt them? It means that they're really guilty. Was lifter is shaykh. When could you say to exempt them? And das ist nicht durch Zug bringen as koloilum kulei to tshuva. It's not by bringing the entire world to do tshuva. Then he doesn't have to exempt them, because then they're on a higher. He doesn't need his exemption. When we say he needs the exemption, that means the world nor vidivel state in a matzav shildin. That's the way the world is standing in a situation. This is judgment. Mitzadim nyonim bilti ritzuyim, because of undesirable matters that the world is in a level of judgment. He says, I can exempt soivil kolam enisayim upoitram min hadin. He tolerates all their sins and he exempts them from judgment. Osin aprat, a certain detail. So you can either elevate them, bring them all to Baal Tshuva, or to accept them even the way they are. So in a certain detail, there's an advantage. It's better within themselves to accept them. That is even a much greater accomplishment than to change, than to impact a change in the world, that the world should start running in a holy way and become good. This lifter as the way it is in the matter. When you impact a change in the world, was damut verdoch der mata nisala, then the low one becomes elevated. What does it mean becomes elevated? And vert ois mata. He's no longer the level of mata. The ra vert botlevin is hapech. The ra becomes nullified and turned around. Mashenkin dozok Rashbi. What Rashbi is saying, what he's saying is, as a lakus can the greichen, that godliness can reach umpoilt oich and impacts also in the mato, in the lower vieris mato, as it is in the lowest stage. When in the ra vieris bim koimen, and on the evil as it is in his place. And there too, choni lifted, and there he can be mavshach, masi, he can heal. Similar is in our case. The Ula from Yaakov of Esav, when Yaakov impacts Esav, is not in them as Esav also tshuva, is not Esav to tshuva, so then he's no longer an Esav. Nor as Esav Zaindik in them Maimed Matzah, but as while Esav is still in a situation in Vosalochi Bidush Esav saying Yaakov, he's still in the situation. The halacha is that Esav hates Yaakov. Vert oich by him nichmuru rachmo cholu. So by him also the compassion's heat up v'noshke b'choliba, and he kisses him with the whole heart. He impacts that while he is still the Esav, and yet he brings him down that level that he can kiss him with all of his heart. Yud beis. Der fun hat man the hero of them klolus, the kolas man from Golus Adam. This we have the lesson of the general and for the extended period of the Golus Adam, that we're still in the Golus Adam, on the Vedic service and on both extremes. On one hand, you cannot rely on Goyim, Malchus Adam, the kingdom of Adam. But this halacha that Esav hates Yaakov. But on the other hand, a yid has the power to influence, to impact Esav. Even as Esav is in that situation that he hates him, he can influence him that his compassion should warm up and he should kiss him with all his heart. As a help from Eden, he should help Eden, in allem was that they should help Eden and give to the Eden everything that they need. Bees to help Eden gain in them that of the darfur gain, to the extent also that they will help Eden to follow the path that Eden need to go into, and they will help them out. Was das kommt, that comes when I each state betoykef in sein hanoge. When a yid stands with force with strength in his conduct al pi Torah mitzvahs, based on Torah mitzvahs. I feel in the matzav hagolus, even in the situation of exile. And does not become impacted, does not become affected from the goyim and goyishkeit. And he actually lets Esav known, as the pasuk begins on our pashim, Lovan Marosha Garti, Betaryag Mitzvah Shamarti. I lived with Lovan, the evil, and I still kept the mitzvahs. And through that standing with force, with a toikif, it becomes fulfilled in actuality. That which is written of Torah. From the Parsha. Chazoin Oivadya. This is the vision of Oivadya. Oivadya, meaning the servant of Hashem, Koyomer Hashem Elikim Le'edem. So says Hashem Elikim Le'edem. Who was this Oivadya? Was Oivadya Geir Adoi Mehoya? He was a Geir from the Adoi. And he is prophesizing the destruction of Edom. That this is what people say from the forest itself, you make the axe that cuts down the forest. Meaning that from Esav itself comes the prophecy of Evadia that Edom, from where he comes from, is going to be cut down. Until the end of the subject matter of the Haftorah, they will go up when saved, salvation in Mount Sion, to judge Mount Nevesav, and the kingdom will be to Hashem. This has already been, this prophecy has already been foretold and said, instructed in our Parsha, from Vayishlach as a result that he kissed him Gomer, Vayomer Niso. He said, let's journey, and he accepted it. He accepted the invitation, let's go to Seir. I will come. But when? In the days of Mashiach, from this pasuk. And Ba'olu Mashim, because of Mamish, very soon, we will go up saved in the true and complete redemption through our righteous Mashiach. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Vayishlach Tov Shin Mem.